Hello, everyone. This is Reverend John Turner from the Orange County Buddhist Church and the Vista Buddhist Temple, and welcome to our New Year's Eve special service. We're saying goodbye to 2020 and shortly hello to 2021. It's been a year of great change, and we're turning the calendar as well. So if you could first please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu. So, for the order of service, we'll begin with sutra chanting. We'll be beginning with Sambujo on page 29, where we welcome and invite Amida Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and all the teachers in the 10 directions to this service. And then we'll chant Jusege on page 39, a selected saying on page 23, and then my English Dharma talk will close with a selected saying, and then Reverend Dr. Wandra will give her talk in Nihongo. So please get your service books and turn to page 29, and we'll begin the chanting portion of our service. Namandavats, 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 namandavats.
namandavats, 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 namandavats.
All right, we're back. Thank you very much. I really enjoy Sambujo and the Jusege. The Sambujo is more melodic. It's very meaningful. And we're going to kind of talk about this. What do we mean by inviting Amida Buddha and the historical Buddha and all the Buddhas and teachers from the 10 directions to our service? Do we mean it literally? Is it a metaphor? Is it doctrine? So we'll investigate that. But at New Year's, a lot of times we give and make New Year's wish, a New Year's resolution. So I thought it would be a good idea to begin with maybe the most important Buddhist New Year's resolution, along with those of the 48 vows from the larger sutra, is the Bodhisattva vow. So if you could turn to page 23, and we put our hands together. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu. Thank you very much. So again, is this hyperbole? Is it exaggeration? Is it literal? What do these vows and these chants and the mythology of Buddhism, what does it mean? So I wanted to talk today about the importance of narratives, of vows, of aspirations for literally creating a reality for our lives. So we're going to have a New Year's narrative for today. So I looked around on the internet, and this is a popular meme in American history. You have the newborn New Year baby on January 1st. So that's little baby 2021. And then we have an older gentleman. He's 2020, and he's about to come to pass. And I think in Japan or in the East, they might call this New Year's End service. In America, we call it New Year's Eve. So you could imagine maybe New Year's End service, you would focus on the old man and reflect on what the year has brought you and what you've learned. We talked about this for American holidays as well. Gratitude for Thanksgiving, oneness at the Christmas holiday time. And here you could have two perspectives. You could either reflect on the year that's passed or, and perhaps, and look forward to new possibilities, the fresh new day, a new beginning when the calendar changes its name from 2020 to 2021. And what we do, especially when we focus on the little baby, is we make a New Year's resolution. And this can become the beginning sentence of the story of our life for the next 365 days. So this is an important, meaningful tradition to stop and come up with a phrase that's going to be your motto or your tagline for 2021. So by doing this, you are creating a narrative or a story for yourself and for your life. It's something that you plan to live. And I mentioned before, it's better if it's process-oriented than if it's goal-oriented. You want something that you can do, an activity, a habit, something that you actualize every day. So you might ask yourself, what's going to be your story for 2021? The story for 2020 is coming to a close, but there's a new story. Every day is a new day. Every day is a new beginning. And oftentimes in the West, we have fairy tales, and they all begin with once upon a time. Star Wars began like this, but it was very interesting. It was a science fiction story, but it was placed in the distant past. Your once upon a time could also be in the distant future. But from a Buddhist perspective, This once upon a time is this unique moment in the here and now. So we need to think of how we can create a story for ourselves once upon a here and now. So this is an important day to reflect and say in language and in words what your plans are for your future life. And when I mentioned this idea of creating narratives, I was talking to a counselor who was interested in Buddhism, and she mentioned narrative therapy. And I went and looked it up. She said there was a lot of similarities with narrative therapy, with creating your own story, finding your own meaning in life, assigning meaning to the events in your life. The events on the ground don't change, but how you interpret them and internalize them and the influence they have on you changes greatly by how you incorporate them and the meaning you place upon them. So I was going to circle one or two of these highlighted sentences in yellow, but they're also good. I'm going to read them all. Starting from the upper left corner, clockwise, it says, interpretation of experiences is done through language. So in the Pure Land tradition, words and language, speech, this is how we assign meaning by the words we choose and the vows we make. The next one, individuals can have different realities of the same experience. So in effect, we can change our experiences based on the narrative we create. There's a little narrative voice in our mind, and it can either be quite positive or negative, depending on what we emphasize. Next, interaction with others impacts how we experience reality. And I would say this is the importance of the Buddhist Sangha. It's being together, speaking and talking and interacting with one another has a great impact on how we see the world. And then lastly, narrative can help us make sense of our experiences. Rather than chaos, we can linearize it. And if we can put it into language, that alone can be very therapeutic. One of the things they say for counselors is just listening and letting the other person talk is itself therapeutic. They have to organize their life. They have to label it. They have to make some sense out of it to be able to put it into words. And here's the importance of language and writing. You want to document the evidence of your life. Narrative therapists believe that new stories take hold when there is an audience to appreciate and support them. So you can create a new story for your life, a new meaning. And letter writing or gratitude diaries is very, very helpful. So I wanted to show you a couple sentences about narrative therapy. Narrative therapy is a method of therapy that separates a person from their problem. So I think I would say it gives us distance. It gives us perspective. It encourages people to rely on their own skills to minimize problems that exist in their lives. So many times, changing our orientation changes the way we interpret our lives. Throughout life, personal experiences become personal stories. People give these stories meaning, and the stories help shape a person's identity. Narrative therapy uses the power of these stories to help people discover their life purpose. This is often done by assigning that person the role of narrator in their own story. And so, we create the reality. We create the meaning of our lives, but it's so effortless, it seems external and objective, but the problems are really internal and subjective. So I wanted to share this with you. The Pure Land Sutras, the larger sutra, is a giant narrative. It's a grand, vast story of a student named Dharmakara who is a king and comes upon a great teacher, Lokesvara, and it awakens a yearning, an aspiration to seek the Buddha way. And Dharmakara creates 48 vows. This is the way I will see the world. He's creating a narrative, and this is a powerful story. And it's more popular in ancient times than it would be if you just interpreted it doctrinally. So I often talk about the Pure Land Sutras in a mythical way. There's a profound mythical meaning, or the elements of the story or the characters in the story are a placeholder for something philosophical or doctrinal, or maybe even ethical and moral. But I found this paper by Luis O. Gomez, a very famous Buddhist scholar, and he talks about on reading literature literally, concrete imagery before doctrine. And I thought, how in the world could this be true? How could a scholar of Buddhism want us to read the larger sutra literally? So I got this paper and I read it, and it was difficult, but I got the PDF, and then I was able to highlight the bits in yellow. And it was really an amazing article. It's saying that modern people are missing the depth and profound meaning of the larger sutra because we quickly reinterpret everything as placeholders for doctrine or theology. And this doesn't really explain why this story would be so appealing to Buddhists in India and China and Japan. So he says, what would have made the existence of Amida believable to an audience in ancient India? What would that belief look like if it were understood literally and not simply as a metaphor for some philosophical or ethical conception? So he's saying it's deeper than, Buddha nature is being played by the mythical character or the metaphor of Amida Buddha. It actually represents a literal spiritual landscape. It's the way you would see the world through the eyes of a Buddha. So I collected some quotes here I wanted to share with you. He says, to realize that the first or concrete literal meaning seems to say something more than what we communicate to our students and audiences with our doctrinal, philosophic, or normative interpretations. So when we decompose this great story into doctrinal points or nuances or vocabulary words, we're kind of appreciating the trees and not the forest. He's claiming that the Pure Land Sutras could be taken literally true as a spiritual narrative, a way of viewing the world, a way of adopting this worldview and being able to touch infinite reality and truth in your everyday life. He says that we are in some ways still entrapped by the lure of Buddhist doctrinal subtleties. But obviously, there is more to Buddhist texts than the arguments. For that matter, the dogmatic enumerations of the scholastic tradition. So one of the things that Pure Land Buddhism pushes back against is appreciating the Buddha Dharma in only a scholastic or academic way, or as an intellectual idea to be understood. There's a deep feeling, there's emotionality, there is a profound truth in these stories. And in a sense, it's describing the world as it would be seen literally by somebody that has insight. This is how somebody with deep, profound Buddhist practice would move through the world. And this would explain its profound popularity throughout history before the scientific revolution, the scientific method, and the Enlightenment. He also states, I also contend that a metaphoric, symbolic, or theological reading depends to a certain extent on an initial acceptance of the concrete alternative world posited by the text. So you can still see metaphor, you can still see doctrine, but that's not what you should rush to. You should let the story wash over you. You should accept it initially as a concrete alternative world that's inhabited by people that made progress along the Buddhist path. So he says, hence, to understand such a universe, we are left with two main types of strategies. Either we assume that all of this is metaphoric, in some cases perhaps allegoric, and that a theological unpacking is necessary, if not inevitable. Or we jump in and ask ourselves what it would be like to inhabit that universe. When I first came to OCBC and I saw this Nijin behind me, it took my breath away. I didn't break every piece up there down into its symbolic meaning. I've had a minister say there's a danger in that. It's the fallacy of decomposition. You break down all the elements on the Nijin into doctrinal elements, and you lose the affective, emotional impact it has on your heart. When I first saw this, I found it overwhelming. I didn't know what the candle stood for. I didn't know what the flowers meant. I didn't know why it was gold. But I experienced a peaceful, open view of the world. And I thought to myself, I would really like my life to feel the way the Nijin looks. I want to experience my very own life the way I'm experiencing the Nijin. And this is what he's getting at here. And there's a lot of universes that we inhabit. There's the DC Comics universe. There's the Marvel Comics universe. There's the Star Wars universe. Baby Grogu right now is in a battle in The Mandalorian. And the characters often say, I have spoken, and this is the way. That's a universe of right and wrong and good and bad. And you place yourself in that universe and experience it as a profound story about human existence. There's also Star Trek. There's also Harry Potter. So when we read the texts, rather than rushing to the internal doctrinal meaning, why not experience that universe, inhabit the larger sutra, go on a journey with Dharmakara. So I thought this was really quite excellent. Gomez says, I have here argued that we must add to these evidently vital and valid forms of reading the sutras a dimension that, for lack of a better word, I have called narrative vistas. So he's saying that these texts, for lack of a better word, he calls them narrative vistas. They're presenting a narrative, a new vista, a new landscape, a spiritual landscape in which we can experience in our own lives, to see the world through the lens of the larger sutra, that it is literally true. It is a literally true religious story. How it would feel, how it would look, how we would behave if we lived in such a world. And it's inviting us to join that world. Worlds can be constructed narratively in such a way that the believer begins to have a clear view, a vista, and perhaps a vision that, despite its apparent unnaturalness, constitutes a reality that becomes natural by virtue of narrative power, because it is in our own nature to live in narrative realities, and religion is not an exception to this rule. So I really like this quote. For some reason, well, it's not some reason, Protestant Christianity, one of its ways of kind of differentiating itself from Catholicism, the Bible is literally true. It's black and white, it's historical, and it's factual. One scholar said, literally true means you could have filmed it with a camcorder and watched it on your VCR if those things had existed 2,500 years ago. But here, Gomez is saying something much more sophisticated, that it is concrete imagery. It's a literal vision. It's a narrative reality. And religion is no different than any other grand literary tradition or story. For some reason, we want our religions to be historically accurate. We want it to happen as if it was filmed in a documentary. But he's saying that these are literally true. This is the vision of how things are when one practices and adopts the vows of the Bodhisattva and lives the 48 vows of the Buddha. When we say Namo Amida Butsu, we are identifying our lives with this religious vista, this narrative reality that becomes our own. So this once upon a time becomes our story. And it's a story that we can kind of commit to as a New Year's resolution. Vows, aspirations become inspirational, aspirational, and they direct us forward. We interpret our world through the lens of this larger sutra. And so Amida Buddha is not just a personification of Buddha nature. He's not merely a stand-in for some doctrinal technicality or theological point being made by monastic doctrinal scholars. This is a story that you identify with. You want to be like Dharmakara. That is a lifestyle that we should adopt. We should go on the same journey. We should have the same vows. And when we say Namo Amida Butsu, that story, that narrative, that vista is spread across throughout our life, through our life and times, through our here and now. It becomes our once upon a time. And so when we look at the Naijin, we are seeing the world through the eyes of a Buddha. Everything is golden. Everything is peaceful. You smell the incense. It's silent. And you really feel your heart connected to something that transcends our normal way of thinking. And this is the power of the larger sutra and these grand Mahayana mythical stories. They're not metaphors. They're not myths. They're concrete religious vistas. They're literal points of view. They are narratives that we are being suggested to adopt. We begin chanting the Jusege, in a sense, repeating the words of Dharmakara. We're in the third person. We're pantomiming or mimicking him. When we say, I seek the highest supreme enlightenment, those are the words of Amida or Dharmakara. But I think as we chant Namo Amida Butsu and we chant the Jusege, they become vows, in a sense, that become our own true reality. And we began to chant in the first person. I hope to reach enlightenment. I'm living the same life story of Dharmakara. I found my narrative. I found my vista. I found my new perspective on life through reliving and adopting these stories as my own. So I hope this New Year's Eve, we can all have a New Year's resolution that we adopt as a overarching narrative for our lives. We have a vow and an aspiration moving forward. So if you could please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So I'd like to close with this vow, something that becomes your own, that you say it enough that you memorize it, and these become your words. So please join me on page 23. The Bodhisattva vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. And now, Reverend Dr. Mutsumi Wondra for our Dharma talk in Japanese, our announcements, and she will close service. Thank you very much.
皆様、オレンジ軍仏教会のワンドラムツミでございます。今日は 2020年の最後の日、12月30日でございます。除夜に際しまして、日本語のお取り次ぎをさせていただきます。よろしくお願いいたします。I will speak Japanese, but you can see my English translation on the screen. Okay? それでは皆様合唱いたしましょう。ナモアミダ仏、ナモアミダ仏、ナマンダ仏、ナマンダ仏、ナマンダ仏。皆様よく本当にお感じになっておられますように、2020年はですね、コロナというお病気が入りましてですね、その中でコロナ禍の中で、みんなが体験したことのない厳しい年でした。とても大変でしたが、どうにか私たちはこの新しいライフスタイルに順応しております。おかげさまで、このように YouTube を通してですね、3月からずっと日曜礼拝の発信をお届けしておりまして、OCBC オレンジ軍仏教会、また長年お世話をさせていただいておりますビスタ寺院の皆様にですね、仏様の見教え、そしてお念仏の見教えをお唱えすることができたということは本当に喜びと思っております。例年ですとですね、この除夜では除夜の鐘をつきますよね。それがですね、今年は本当に残念ながらそれできません。ね皆さん、このサービスが終わった後は、去年でしたらずっと列を作ってですね、お大臣に入ってくださって、このお大臣の後ろにございます、鐘をみんなで叩いたわけです。思い出しますね。でも今年は申し訳ないですけれども、コロナのことでできそうにございません。そういうことで、このように YouTube から発信させていただいております。浄土真宗の教えは、毎日のお念仏の生活の中で、自分の行動といいますか、あるいは行いですね、そして私が話している話し方、そして自分の心の持ち方というものをですね、お念仏を通して毎日反省させてもらえるという教えでございます。ですから、こうして合唱いたしますでしょ、手を合わせて。そして心静かにですね、阿弥陀如来様からのお声掛け、それは南無阿弥陀仏ですよ。如来様が私たち一人一人に南無阿弥陀仏をお届けしてくださっているわけです。そのお呼び声を聞くことによってですね、昨日の私、そして今日の私をね、見せてもらうことになるわけです。そして同時に、阿弥陀如来様から私に差し向けられている願い、その願いがいっぱい詰まったお宝をいただいていることに深く喜びを感じるわけですね。じゃあその願いとは何かというと、それは如来様が必ずあなたを守ります。ですから心配しないで、一生懸命楽しく毎日をお過ごしください。ただ一つ、私のお呼び声、南無阿弥陀仏を聞いてくださいとおっしゃっているわけですね。それを願いを私たちそれぞれが本当にありがたくいただいて、それに応じて生きていく。そして生きていきながらお念仏の毎日をさせていただいて、私が仏にならせていただく、そういうお育てをいただいているということ。これが浄土真宗の見教えでございます。除夜の鐘は108、叩くわけです。どうも人間には108の煩悩があるらしいですね。その煩悩というのは何かというと、大きなもので三毒の煩悩と言います。三毒ですから3つぐらい大きなものがあるわけです。一つは怒りの心、怒る心です。そしてむさぼりの心、これはジェラシーですね。そして一つは愚かな無知の心というふうに言われております。この除夜会31日に 108の鐘を叩くことによって、この1年間私の体にあった積もり積もったそういう三毒の煩悩をきれいにするというのが除夜の意味でございます。ねえ、親鸞上人様は言われました。この3つの三毒の煩悩というのは人間が持つ本質であります。ね、みんな持っているわけです。私も持っております。皆様それぞれもきっとお持ちでございましょう。ね、ですから、一生懸命ですね、鐘を108叩いてきれいにすることはよろしゅうございますよ。しかしながら、やっぱり叩いた後に必ず何かの心が戻ってくるわけですね。うん、いくら、私は怒ってはいけないとか、あるいはジェラシーを持ってはいけないとかですね、あるいは何でしょうね、愚かになりたくないとか、そういう願ってもですね、人間である限り必ずその心がまた芽生えてくるのです。でもね、親鸞様はね、その煩悩が帰ってきても良いのですとおっしゃいました。そういう私たちの人間であるから、そういう煩悩を抱えた普通の凡夫である私だから、阿弥陀如来様はおられるのだと。阿弥陀如来様の深い深いお慈悲の心、願いがあるということをおっしゃられたわけでございます。ねえ、そういうね、大事なことはですね、その三毒の煩悩が戻ってきても良いのですけれども、ただそのことに気づくことが大切であるということでございます。ね、今日は大晦日ですけれども、除夜の鐘だけではなくしてですね、年越しそばもいただくことになりますね。で、年越しそばを、この年末、年越しですから、この大晦日にいただくことは伝統的なものでございます。今ちょっと画面でお見せしておりますように、お蕎麦、このお写真見てください。とても美味しそうですね。エビの天ぷらがあったり、かまぼこやほうれん草、ネギ、とても美味しいおつゆでいただきます。特に寒い日はですね、もう本当に体がボカボカになるぐらい美味しいお蕎麦でございます。で、どうしてお蕎麦なのかなと言いますとね、このお蕎麦っていうのはやっぱり名護ございますでしょ。ですから、長寿、長生きいたしましょう。長生きさせてほしいという願いが詰まっているわけですね。そして次の写真はですね、これは門松と言いますけれども、ご家庭によっては門松を建てられることもあると思います。このようにお玄関にね、立てるわけですけれども、この門松は例えば竹やそれから松、それから南天という赤い実がありますけれども、そういうもので作られております。仏様を新年にお家の中に歓迎するということで、喜びと幸せを表したものでございます。そして次の写真ですけれども、これはお餅ですね。今年はコロナでですね、お寺でお餅の用意はできませんでしたけれども、各ご家庭で、お用意されておりますか？私もお餅が大好きでございます。でこのようにですね、お家の中で、お餅を備えて、お正月に、備えるわけでございます。そして、これを忘れてはいけません。次の写真はですね、お正月、ね、に必ず皆さんお召し上がりになるおせち料理ですね。特に巣ごもり生活の中でですね、お店ではいろいろなおせち料理の具材が並んでおりますね。お雑煮も大切なお正月メニューでございます。ね、どうかお正月のいろんなお料理を楽しんでいただきたいと思っております。このチャレンジ多かった2020年を閉じるにあたりまして、今一度皆様と共にですね、合唱して 仏様に、元気で暮らさせていただいたことに感謝いたしましょう。そして私はお念仏、南無阿弥陀仏は元気の源だと思います。嬉しい時も悲しい時も、そして、御仏様の皆様に対するですね、深い深いお慈悲と、そして知恵の心が届いているわけです。そのことにですね、今一度、この最後の日、12月31日をもちまして、合唱して仏様に、感謝したいと思います。はい。それではですね、皆様どうぞ良いお年をお迎えくださいませ。最後に、今年1年、OCBC、またビスター店舗のですね、ご支援、そしてご協力をいただきましたことに、心より感謝申し上げます。それでは皆様、合唱して私の日本語法話を終わらせていただきます。南無阿弥陀仏、南無阿弥陀仏、南無阿弥陀仏、南無阿弥陀仏。Thank you for your participation in this Joya New Year Eve service. And this concludes Joya service. And Happy New Year to all of you. And tomorrow morning, we'll have a New Year day service at 10 o'clock. Please join us. これにて、上映の法要を終わらせていただきます。ご参加いただきましてありがとうございました。明日の朝10時から終章へといたしまして、元旦のお勤めを10時からこの YouTube から放映いたしますので、どうかご参加いただきますようにご案内申し上げます。どうもありがとうございます。Thank you very much.